Hey guys, Stealth here with another deck review. It's a bit of a weird deck actually. It's a deck that was sent in by Jimmyisback, and it's a general NATO deck. Now these things are pretty damn rare. I personally don't use them myself because I don't find them that useful. They don't have any national prototypes, so you don't get access to the prototype units, which can often really make a heavy impact on what kind of unit you have, on the kind of deck that you get, and on the kind of impact you can have on the gameplay. Now this deck is created to pretty much do anything. It can take care of urbanized environments, go into open ground. He writes, it's actually really hard to build a NATO deck since you only have 50 points of activation. And that is exactly my problem. You don't get a lot of activation points, and that means that you're going to make hard choices. Some units that you would like to have, you cannot get. Some units that you need, you cannot get the activation points for. So I personally don't use them that much, but let's see if this deck is any good. Now, since Jimmy wrote that it's a deck that is supposed to be able to do anything, that's what I'm going to keep in mind. And that means that it's going to have to do anything ranging from 2v2 to 10v10 urban, so it has to be able to operate in one's own harbor. It has to be able to do its job in say the large open fields of Hope and Glory. Let's see if it can do that. Command-wise, he has the M48 command tank and the TACOM infantry unit. Well, the infantry is not that interesting, although as I was looking at these guys yesterday, I think that they have an insanely good machine gun, the M240. If you compare that to some of the infantry, you're going to see that their machine gun is significantly worse. Anyway, this command tank, I don't really like it. I think that there are better options. It does have a decent amount of armor. For 120 points you get more armor than you get on most APCs, for example. Looking at this one, 2 front, 2 side versus 5 front, 3 side. Let's see what else we can get. This one's slightly worse. We get a command Leopard. Leopard 1 that is, which has more frontal armor at 8, but you pay 30 points more for it. We got a Leopard AS1, same thing pretty much. Leopard 2, very heavily armored. I don't really use these guys that often. Nanion Shiki CV, not that good. You got the Stridswagen 103B, which might be an interesting one, because it's nice and mobile, it's small, as compared to the big size of this command tank. Autonomy is slightly worse, I think, 400 for 60. Off-road speed, 50 and 50. Let's just compare these, that's a lot easier. The gun on them is, I suppose you should say, a lot better. 1 armor penetration might not be that interesting, but they have almost twice the rate of fire. But again, it's 30 points more expensive. Are you going to spend that 30 points on 7 armor? I'd say yeah. They are worth it, because you want to get a CV that's defended. So that's why I would go with this CV. Of course he has logistics units, a FOB, a large transport chopper in the form of the 53G, and then a Hammett if you want to get some stuff into supply, if you're going to supplies into, for example, an urban area where you cannot go with a helicopter. Infantry wise, you have such a huge selection of possible infantry that it is very hard to make a choice here. I mean, pick your poison. There's a ton of infantry here. He went with the Fusiliers and the Panzer Grenadiers. Let's first off discuss the Fusiliers. I like the unit. I think that the Fusiliers 90, while they're not stellar, they do have a nice anti-tank weapon with a great accuracy, great armor penetration. Their main assault rifle, the L85, is not great. Their LMG is not great, but it gets the job done. They are only 15 points, and he went with the Warrior 90 to get a Rarden. Unfortunately, we don't get access to we do get access to the Warrior Milan. If you want to get a bit more armor penetration or a long-range anti-tank weapon, you could go for the Milan 2. No, for the FV Warrior Milan, because then you get the Milan F2 on that as well as the Rarden. His accuracy is the same. Armor on these things is very, very high at 6. Let's see if it does anything to our availability. Yeah, he has 12 hardened, or you can get 12 trained if you go for the Warrior Milan. Other options here, instead of Fusiliers, let's see, Stormers, maybe. Paratroopers I wouldn't really use because you don't have enough of them. Riflemen, definitely not Riflemen. Rifleman 90, I'd stay clear from these if you can, because the AT4 is in so many ways inferior to the LOL 80 that it's just a big nope. Rimas are nice infantry units as well, but shock trained, so you get less of them. Stormers, again shock trained. But how about Livgarden? Let's see about those guys. As you can see, it's quite a bit of scrolling here. Livgarden 85, again shock trained. And he has 12 Fusiliers. We can get 12 Livgarden 85. Let's see about their weaponry. Livgarden might be better than the Fusiliers, although their transport is worse. Let's see. The Livgarden have the Carl Gustav M3, which is a pretty... well, it's better in the range sense. It's worse in accuracy and armor penetration, and worse in rate of fire. Anti-infantry wise, they're better, because they got the LMG3 compared to the L86 LMG. And their assault rifle, or their battle rifle in this case, is better than the assault rifle. But they're more expensive, and you don't get a great transport with them. So let's stick with these as our line infantry, because they're a nice combination of the Warrior 90, which has heavy armor, and the Fusiliers 90 with their heavy AT capacity. If you want to do some anti-infantry warfare, you can always call upon the Panzer Grenadiers. He has 8 of these in the Marder 1A3. Unfortunately, we don't get access to the Marder 2 because it's a prototype unit. So we're just going to have to fend for ourselves with Panzer Grenadiers. Oh, we actually went with the standard Panzer Grenadiers. And that's probably because the Panzer Grenadiers 90 are classed as a prototype. So we only got base Panzer Grenadiers, and in this situation I don't think that they're the best option. Reason for that is that you want something in a shock trooper that can deal a lot of damage to infantry. And we have the Royal Marines to do that in part. These guys with their Panzer 44 are not that great. They have a nice weapon, the LMG3. They got a great battle rifle. So in that sense they're good against infantry, but this weapon is, well, it might not be the best. Let's see, unfortunately we cannot filter it by shock trained. Let's see, alternatives for the Panzer Grenadiers. Rima 85. They got a slightly worse weapon in the form of the FAMAS, although it does have a higher rate of fire, but a lower suppression. And same for the Mini-Me, lower rate of suppression. Stormers, pretty damn good battle rifle, the AG3 and the LMG3. But stat-wise, they're pretty much exactly the same as the Panzer Grenadiers. The only change here is that their anti-tank weapon has better accuracy and slightly better armor penetration. So that's a possible option. Let's see here. Marines 90, 15-man squad, good against infantry, although again not as accurate as the Panzer Grenadiers. Paratroopers, meh. Probably looking in the wrong section. What we could do is just switch to commandos. When you want to have something that can kill infantry, you don't want to use the Panzer Grenadiers, you want to use something like Delta Force, Fallschirmjäger Base, not Fallschirmjäger 90 unfortunately. Commando Marines, guys like that are really going to mess up the day of the enemy infantry. What I think would work best here is Delta Force with their MP5SD and their M60. The problem is that you lose the Marder 1A3, so you lose an autocannon vehicle, and that's not something we're going to get on any of the others. So what I would do here is still stick with Delta Force and get 8 of those in. Then he has Mistrals, AA, great unit, nothing I would change here. And Royal Marines 90, possibly for operations behind enemy lines, I'm not entirely sure. They can also be used as land grabs, because they have a very fast links AH7. Their problem is that they do run out of that Law 80 eventually at 8 missiles. They're pretty damn expensive at 35 points, so that is all stuff you need to keep in mind when you're using this unit. Support wise, 2 AA units, or actually 3, but 2 gun AA units in the form of the Gepard A1 and the K263. This is a pretty cheap unit. This one's slightly more expensive at 15 points more, but I think that you get a much better weapon for it. Considering that this deck is supposed to be able to do everything, I would bring a mortar, because a mortar is going to add so much versatility and flexibility to your deck that I've grown so accustomed to it that I can barely function without it. I know it may be a bit weird, but if you've seen my UK Airborne gameplay, you know that I really miss mortars if I don't have them. Now the question is, what kind of mortar do you take? 5 HE on a mortar is nice to have. Dispersion doesn't really need to be 2730. It's nice if it is, but stuff like this, 3185, is also perfectly fine. And the thing is, most of these mortars have pretty much to exactly the same specs. It doesn't really matter what unit you take. I'm just going to go for the 107 MSP because it has a nice mix of rate of fire of 12, rounds that the unit carries, range 6300, and dispersion. So 6 of those. Then he has a couple of Rolands. Nice all-round AA unit. They can do helicopters and aircraft pretty well, although they're more geared towards aircraft. For the helicopters we've got the Gepards. And howitzer-wise, he has the AMX AU-F1. Howitzers you get a ton of as well, particularly since you're only using NATO. I think that he went with the best one here. All the M109A2, A3s are pretty much the same unit again. The M110s is same thing. They all have pretty much the same specs. Maybe there's some of them that have been slightly upgraded, but I don't really think so. So let's go with the AMX AU-F1. Now, tanks. He has the Kia Marushiki, which is a tank that is, I suppose you could class it as a super heavy, considering that it has a very high armor penetration gun. It has good frontal armor at 20, good rate of fire, 12 rounds a minute is very high for a super heavy, and you can even bring 2 cards if you'd want to. So this is the super heavy, great unit. You don't get a lot of alternatives. Let's see if we can filter this, 90 and more. Challenger 1 Mark III are inferior to the Kia Marushiki, and same is the M101HA or the Leopard 2A4. Talking about Leopard 2A4, he has 1 card of 4 of these in. Let's quickly compare them to the M101HA. You still get 4 of those. Difference is that the M101HA has slightly more armor, and other than that they have almost exactly the same gun spec-wise. Same rate of fire, same suppression, same HE, same AP power, same stabilizer, same accuracy. So you can also look at stuff like autonomy, which is going to weigh in. The autonomy on the Leopard's better. The speed off-road for the Leopard's better. They're both classed as big tanks, so that doesn't really matter. But the M101HA, for 10 points, I believe only gives me 1 point more frontal armor, 1 less on the side. So I'm just going to go for a well-rounded tank like the Leopard 2A4. I think that Jimmy made the right choice here. Then a couple of K1s. We do get access to the M1A1 or the M1IP, but the K1s are pretty similar. You can see that the K1s that he has selected have almost the same stats as the M1IP. Let's see if there's any difference at all. There's 1 point of armor penetration difference. Speed, the Abrams IP is slightly faster. Armor, same deal. Exactly the same tank. I think that the K1 for 85 points is a slightly better deal, because it has more autonomy and that 1 extra armor penetration. So let's stick with the K1. And then a couple of auxiliary tanks, if you will, in the form of the the AMX 30 B2 Brennus. Let's see, 40 to 85 is what I would select as a filter here. These tanks have a really nice gun. For 65 points they're very accurate at 60%. Armor penetration of 16, but they cannot fire that gun on the move. They do not have stabilizer at all. So what I would like is a unit that can do something similar, but have a stabilizer as it's doing it. The Swedish tanks came to mind, but they don't have a stabilizer, but they do have a very high rate of fire. Neneon Shiki E has almost the same stats. Let's see. It does sacrifice 5 points of armor, have the same armor penetration, but this thing can fire pretty much on full speed at almost the same accuracy as if it were standing still. The problem again is that it does not fire, or it does not have a lot of armor, only 6. But we get 12 of these at hardened. We get, how many Brennises do we get? 12 at trained. Leopard 1A5s would also be an option. They are almost as heavily armored as the B2. They are slightly slower, which is unexpected. I thought that the B2 would be as fast as the Leopard 1A5. Accuracy is better. Stabilizer at 50% is very, very nice to have. Armor penetration is the same and rate of fire is 1 point higher. What you do lose is the autocannon, but I'll take that loss. So I'm just going to go with the Leopard 1A5 here instead of the Brennis. Reconnaissance wise, he went with Navy SEALs. I would never ever transport these guys in a Humvee, because when I drop off Navy SEALs, especially if they're going to be the role of door kickers where they're going to take out infantry, I want them in a V150 because it provides them at least with some armor. So not in a Humvee, but definitely in a V150. Fern Spayers, not that much to say about these guys. They're just a sniper team. Brought in by the CS-53G, so good choice there. Lynx AH-1 as a reconnaissance chopper. You have quite the shopping list for reconnaissance choppers here. I would go for something that is fast and has preferably a strength of higher than 4, because otherwise it's going to get shot down right away. Unfortunately there's not that many units that can do that job. The AS-350 can do it. Let's have that one pinned for selection or pinned for comparison. Alouette is too weak. The Cobra does not have very good optics, but only good optics, but it does have some weapons on it. Let's see, this one, 4 strength, 4, 4, 4, 4 and 4. So I'm going to use the AS-350 instead. Vehicles, he only has 1. This is the Napalm tank, the Zippo. Nice to have, especially since he wants to have the capacity of doing everything, including going into urban environments. Still, I would not really recommend using this deck, I suppose you could say at all, although you can get quite some of your favorite units. But as I mentioned, you're going to have gaps in your deck. The Zippo, though, is a nice tank. Nice amount of napalm, 100 charges, although it's very hard to explain how many or how much use you're actually going to get out of that. Suffice it to say, you will not usually find these things running out of ammo. 1000 meter range, 30% accuracy is just a napalm tank, not much to say about that. Alternatives or units that would also be a nice to have here. Again, we got a very big list. But mostly fire support units that I wouldn't really touch. Kanonenjagdpanzer, for example, it's a bit of an old unit. Not that good. AT weaponry, we got that on our tanks, we got that on our infantry, so we don't really need it in the vehicle tab. You could go with the slightly cheaper M132 Zippo if you want to save 10 points, but this thing at least has some armor. M36s, M18s are funny units, but I wouldn't really use them. Ontos is a nice unit, although it will run out of ammo quickly, but you can really mess up the day of an infantry unit that's out in the open. CEV, also an interesting anti-infantry unit, but I feel that the Zippo is going to be the best option for this deck. So let's have a look at helicopters. We get the Apaches in here. So this is the heavy anti-tank capacity. Super Cobras, because of their AIM-9Ms, don't underestimate these little bastards, because they can shoot down aircraft. They have the sufficient amount of range to actually turn around into the direction that an aircraft is coming from and then shoot at it. So what I've had happen is that these things have shot down my aircraft. Make sure it doesn't happen to you, or that you're the one operating the Super Cobra, where you can be the one who is going to shoot down the aircraft. They also have a TOW 2. The one thing that they miss or that they lack is a rocket pod launcher. But we got AH-1J to do that. I would not really use the AH-1J here because I don't think that having 52 rockets for rocket pods on a helicopter is that useful. I would go with a mix in the form of the, let's see, AH-1E. It is still very cheap at 60 points. You get the TOW, so it has some anti-tank capacity, and it has these rocket pods with Hydras. So that would be my choice for helicopters. And then air-wise, he has a Block 52, nice air superiority fighter. It's pretty much, I would almost class this thing as a prototype, because it's a very good fighter. Luckily it's not, so we can use something like this in the deck. Tornado IDS, a general bomber. I'm inclined to go for the Eagle instead. And by that I mean, let's see if I can find it somewhere here in the deck. Hang on, it was next to this one. Yeah, here it is, the 15D Eagle. The Deagle, because it has these 4 1000 kilogram bombs, better ECM. You will pay 20 points more for it, but they're going to have much more of an impact, literally, than the Mark 83s. So that is my personal preference. Keep in mind though that you will only have one Eagle instead of having 2 IDSs. And then anti-tank unit, he has the Hornet. Great anti-tank sniper, fire and forget missiles, 4 of those, 30 armor penetration and 50% accuracy, so they're very likely to hit. The problem is that they are expensive and you don't have a seaplane to clear the way for this wave, so that's what I mean with having a low amount of activation points. You just cannot bring everything that you would want or need in a deck. See about the naval section. Mostly a commando landing force combined of Commando Marines and Legion 90 and a couple of M60 ERAs. I don't think that we can get one of those super tanks. Let's see. MBT. No, I was looking for the M101HC, but we don't get that in here. I think. Unless it's classed as something else. No, it's not there. So unfortunately the M60 ERA is the best landing force tank that we can get for the Marine Force. He has one Lafayette. No, I would never go with one Lafayette. Always go with multiple. Because these guns will run out, and that's when you have a very expensive floating 200 point unit that's not capable of doing anything. And a couple of Chamseries as escort. It would not really be my setup. But I suppose that since he wants to do a lot of different stuff, like go into urban areas, like tackle 10v10s, 2v2s, anything, this could be a decent setup. I usually go all the way either ships, all the way aircraft, or all the way landing force. But this is a bit of a mix, and he can help out or fill gaps in his own deck where he has them by, for example, calling in a couple of Commando Marines. I would just not pick them at Elite. They're too good for that. Veteran is well enough. And the same for Legionnaires. I would go with 8 of those. So, as mentioned, this deck will not be for everyone, as it only has 50 activation points, which I think is Eugen's way of saying don't take NATO General, go for a coalition or a national deck to get a bit more activation points and get access to the prototypes. But hey, if Jimmy has good luck with this deck, it's all good. So I will personally not be using this deck. I'm not going to do a gameplay video on it because I don't think it fits my playstyle well enough. If you have any good gameplay of this deck, please send it in and let me know that I already did a video on it, because that's when I'm definitely going to cover it if it's a good replay. So with that, it's the end of the video. The deck code for this one is in the description down below, and the link to sending in your own deck or gameplay video is also in the description. So if you have any good decks, particularly Red 4 decks, because it feels like I'm covering blue almost every day at least this week, and for probably some more days in the last week. So if you have any good Red 4 decks, send those in as well. With that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next video.